The past 12 months have seen COVID produce some fascinating and peculiar moments. But one of these that actually tops them all off for sheer madness is this latest moment that sees Daniel Andrews nominated for a political leadership award, and that's despite presiding over 3 lockdowns in Victoria and a coronavirus disaster that claimed the lives of more than 800 Victorians. The Premier has been shortlisted for the 2020 McKinnon Political Leader of the Year Prize, alongside 2 federal politicians, namely the Prime Minister Scott Morrison and the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. 2 leaders who over the past 12 months have done little to actually lead or to win the hearts and minds of Australians. But as I said a moment ago, these are interesting times, which makes the issue of faith so important. That is our faith. When does our faith in a leader expire, to be replaced by a sense of helplessness, psychological burden? It's just despair. Because that's what Victorians have to ask themselves over the next few months, especially after last week's snap so-called circuit-breaking lockdown, which caused so much angst and heartache. How much more faith are the Victorians prepared to invest or show in Daniel Andrews, the leader? How far are they willing to extend their belief in the Premier, who is so loose with the truth? Because the shutdowns will continue just so long as Victorians buy into a narrative of deceit. What Victorians weren't told this time round is that Victoria's contact tracing system remains what it has been for the best of the last 12 months, a failure. Victoria's latest stage 4 lockdown was unwarranted. It was a bridge too far, an overreach, and yet the narrative suited the Premier's purpose of painting a picture of impending doom. It was one that he worked to allow him to cover up his and his government's continued incompetence. Let's put it another way. It was a smokescreen. The need for a circuit breaker to get on top of the strain of the virus is a case of playing Victorians as fools. And he will continue to succeed just so long as Victorians buy into this continuing spin about this, that and the other, without actually questioning the legitimacy of what he's actually saying. Victoria's ongoing failure to correct its substandard contact tracing system continues to be and remains the real and underlying challenge which hasn't been met yet. It is proving to be a major embarrassment to Andrews, and it will haunt him. He has done little to fix the problem because we continue to see the very same mistakes being made over and over again. Even after Victorians were given assurances the issues with contact tracing had been resolved, here we are again, more problems. This was yet another instance of when he was being loose with the truth. So, nothing has changed since 2020. The states are now required to provide the federal government with daily statistics. And last Monday, Victoria fell behind in its contact tracing. It had 31 identified close contacts linked to a hotel quarantine worker, awaiting notification. And because of wrong phone numbers and people not answering their phones, there was a problem. It was a problem New South Wales has never encountered. Daniel Andrews' arrogance towards those working in the north, and again his repeated failure to ask New South Wales, how does it manage its contact tracing, is becoming an anvil that may inevitably sink Victoria. Now, strong leadership means actually knowing when to reach out for help, when there are gaps in your expertise. Victoria deserves a better leader. Andrew's picture of impending doom was deliberately designed. It was designed to scare Victorians into believing that the lockdown was imperative. But it wasn't. It was another mistruth. The talk was all about a mutating, hyper-virulent strain that moved at such rapid speed it could send Victoria into a major lockdown and was much worse than the virus in 2020. And yet, this was the same strain that has been around since late September of last year. And again, what did we see? He was being loose with the truth. It was the same strain that New South Wales had to deal with in a Sydney hotel earlier this year. Gladys Berejiklian contained it. So did Queensland and WA. But again, Daniel Andrews and his team of expert medical advisors was so slow off the mark, it failed to nip it in the bud. It wasn't a circuit breaker that was needed. That was a myth created to cover up more incompetence. The hope was that he would stop an impending third wave that should never have even been on the horizon. If only Victoria had mastered its contact tracing system. Again, another mistruth, as he blamed everyone, and I mean everyone, except his government. Victoria's roll gold standard hotel quarantine system every other state is so envious of is just an illusion, perpetuated in the mind of the Premier. If Victorians continue to support a Premier who treats them and the economy with so little regard and cares only about exercising control and tightening his grip on power, rather than leading with compassion and calm, then we might be better off. But all Andrews has done is dealt Victorians with another dose of fear-mongering. If it continues, Victoria could well again find itself in the same economic mess the state found itself in under the Kane and Jolly years back in the late 80s. That was a time that saw Victoria perched on the precipice of collapse. If his erratic behaviour of nonsensical circuit-breaking lockdowns were to continue, there will be a tipping point where the state could collapse economically. We don't want it. Victorians don't want it. They don't want a revolt similar to what's happening in countries like Italy, Mexico, Poland and Switzerland, where 50,000 restaurant and cafe owners are defying lockdown orders and reopening. What Victorians want and have needed from the very beginning is a government that can lead and deal with COVID without actually killing the Victorian economy or Victorians. And this nomination for the 2020 McKinnon Political Leader Prize could well prove to be a prize of little value or any worth.